Welcome to Third Eyesight. I'm your host, Juan Francisco, and I'm a spiritual intuitive who practices tarot card reading and mediumship. I've always been super curious about the supernatural and paranormal, and I'm here to share my stories and interview folks who want to share their own stories. Let's get to it. I'm very excited to be joined by Emily Barnard of Emily and Her Stars. Emily, how are you doing today?
I'm great. I'm thrilled to be here with you today. I'm so excited for this.
Wonderful. And some of you may know that I was on Emily's podcast, Things That Make You Go Woo, recently. So I'm excited to have her join Third Eyesight today. So tell us, what is your passion and what's your life's work?
Oh, that is like, I know we don't have hours. So let me see if I can condense this. I think for me, I love helping someone see themselves in a way that makes them feel comfortable within their skin, helps them understand. I always say their operating system. I feel that way through astrology and through Akashic records that I can help someone understand their underlying operating system and then also understand the others within their realm, within their lives, and allow us to drop judgment between one another and for ourselves, just to feel comfortable on your own journey. That's my passion.
I love that. I love that. And how could you share what are the different services that you work with that they try to emit that through?
Sure, sure, certainly. So I am an astrologist. I primarily study evolutionary astrology, which has more to do with your soul's journey, not only in this lifetime, but through others. I access the Akashic records and do it through an astrology chart because I like to know what karma you've brought in, what you can leave behind, what's working, what's not. And then I also do mediumship because inevitably, when you start dealing with intuition and psychic things, people come through, you know this. And then I have a podcast and I teach astrology, and I'm sure I'm forgetting like a dozen other things, but yeah, I love it all. I came into my spiritual awakening and my development in my late 30s and has something, I kind of dabbled with for a long time, but I've absolutely enjoyed every bit of my journey so far.
And marrying what you just said with how you first introduced your life's work, which is so important, helping people to realize or rediscover their most authentic selves. How do you, in your work and in the services you provide, how do you ensure that that happens? Like, what are some practices you do, or the ways you conduct your sessions to help people feel that they're in that space?
I think astrology, well, not only has it become more popular recently, for sure, but it also, I think, can feel really overwhelming for people. It feels like they have to learn a foreign language and learn charts and symbols, and there's probably mathematics involved and all these crazy things. That personally kept me from diving into it for so long. And so, a big part of what I really strive to do is to make it accessible and to break it down into pieces that you can utilize and integrate into yourself immediately. I don't want it to feel overwhelming, and I don't want it to feel like you have to take on a whole new, topic of study in order to understand pieces about yourself. So I really like breaking astrology down into the building block pieces that allow people to utilize it in better ways.
That's wonderful. I picked up a book recently. I think it's called how to create your own horoscope, and it just goes into how to read the birth chart, the different symbols, I'm gonna get this wrong, but like the degrees.
Yes.
I don't know if I got that right. You can tell that I picked up the book and I thought, okay, I need some even more time than I thought. But so having an avenue where it's accessible, it's so important. So it sounds like such an important part of your work. And I'm gonna delve into. I want to ask about your beginning with these two realms of things. Number one, your work with astrology, and number two, your work of spirit. So let's go ahead and start first with astrology. When were you first interested in astrology, or who introduced you to it?
It was actually probably my grandmother that introduced it to me the most. She was a big proponent of cutting it out of the newspaper or keeping an eye on it for all of us. And she would be like, "Oh, you're going to have a good week," or "This is going to be a rough one. Hang in there." And she would always on my birthday cut it out of the newspaper and give it to me for like it would give you like your yearly outlook. And so looking back now, I wonder where her love of it started. And I had so many conversations with her, but never about astrology. Isn't it funny? And I really attribute my curiosity to it to her. And after she passed away, um, that's when I really started diving into it a little bit more.
Wow. And it's very rare that I hear someone say that their grandmother introduced them to astrology, just given the time period we're living in, the periods before us. That's really interesting. What was her, if I may ask, like what was her, does she have any like religious convictions or belief systems that influenced her interest in astrology?
It's so funny. So she was born in Duluth, Minnesota, and her dad worked not only at the railroad, but also in the school as the janitor. And her mom worked a little bit outside of the house. She had relatives that were into politics. And I think she was progressive for her age. And she was the youngest of four siblings. But I remember she lived in Canada for a while when my mom was born. And I remember her telling stories about them having their tea leaves read in Winnipeg. And I think there was just sort of this underlying curiosity that was always there for her.
So cool. And
Mhm.
in regards to your work with mediumship, I'm curious to hear what is your earliest memory of interacting with spirit?
Boy, I was thinking about this question last night. And I think probably my earliest memory of thinking there was something else that I didn't understand, I must have been three, maybe four. I'm going to say four, maybe five, because I don't know that I remember being three. But I remember something picking me up out of my bed and starting to carry me down the stairs. And to me, it was like this dream that I had had multiple times. I still can remember it incredibly vividly to this day, but there was always to me something about stairs, whether I was going up them or down them, wherever it was. I didn't want to have my back to the top or the bottom of the stairs. So it was this feeling of being watched and knowing that there was an invisible force that I couldn't see. And so I grew up in a small little mining town, Victorian mining town. And so ghosts were always a hot topic. But I had interactions with them too. We had a small family business in this building, and we would have footsteps go up and down the hallways at night and cold breezes. And so I just think I never thought of myself as a medium until later on, but I knew there was more out there.
And this dream, so to be clear, this was a dream you had, but it was just so vivid
So
that you just,
vivid.
yeah, I remember having a dream like that at the age of 3 or 4,
Really?
actually. And
Really?
not someone carrying me per se, but it was actually, this is going to sound odd, but I remember what it felt like, looked like to this day. I think I was 3 or 4. I had this dream that I was blasting through stars. And
Oh,
but I feel like I was in this capsule, like even though like in Snow White, the cartoon movie, she's in a glass coffin, but it was kind of I was like in this glass capsule, but I was being like shooting through space. But I could to this day I could tell you exactly how the vibration of the capsule going through space. It was really I don't know what to make of it. I may sound cuckoo
right.
to some, but it felt so real. And I was 3 years old. What am I doing at 3 years old dreaming about blasting through space? And it wasn't like, ooh, rockets and aliens. It was just me blasting through space in a glass capsule.
That gave me chills. That is so cool. I agree. It's the details I remember about that dream. I can't remember what I ate for breakfast at that age, but I remember this dream, the glowing color of this being, the feeling of floating. Um, there were just so many qualities about it. Yeah, it's interesting. At three, shooting through space.
No, and I think how vivid these dreams like I don't remember the dream I had last week, but
Right.
there's some dreams we just remember so well because they're so vivid and feel
Mhm.
so real. And I can't help but feel there's something to that in terms of a message being sent to us or us being brought to experience something
Something.
to share
I
about it
agree.
later. Now, I myself have looked into Akashic records very briefly, and even I am not totally sure about what they are, but I have an idea of what they are. So, knowing your work with Akashic records, could you share with someone like me or our listeners who may not know much about them and what they are?
So Akashic records, to me, I always call myself kind of a skeptic woo girl. I go in with everything just thinking, okay, I want to discover it for myself. And so Akashic records were nowhere near my radar. Not even like that was woo that other people do. sounds very judgmental when I say it, but it was too far out of what felt normal for me in my wheelhouse. And I was doing an astrology reading, and I like to focus on the north and south nodes. These are the points of past karma and future destiny. And I remember as I was explaining it to my client, I had very much it felt mediumship like, if that helps any of your listeners, in that I was receiving vivid images and scenery and feelings in my body. And I remember telling this woman I could see her standing in this grass savanna, telling everyone that she was taking care of, that the floods were coming and it was time for her to have them move. And I was telling her this story and how this life is meant for her to focus on her own joy this time. She'd taken care of so many, and tears were just streaming down her face. And she said, I feel this truth in my body. I know this, I've been there. I feel this. And I just thought, what the heck was that? And so I started getting more hits, and Akashic started coming into my realm. It would be in my reels. It's just around. So I decided to take a course with Malibu Medium, Amber Baker, and really learn like how to access them. What is this about? And what I have found is that it is in so many ways like connecting to mediumship and spirit, and that I am receiving the information and the downloads in the same way, but they come in a very specific language, and they come in a way that feels more like a dream than maybe my mediumship does. So Akashic records, Akashic means in Sanskrit, the space, time, the ethers. It would be as if we talked about the elements, fire, earth, air, and water, and then Akasha, which is the spirit realm that we cannot see. And so it's this idea of connecting into higher consciousness, connecting into other realms. I think it's primarily the same in a lot of ways as channeling, as getting a divine download. I think we have different terms for the same thing, but for me, it has allowed me some freedom to accept what I download, what I receive as maybe being divine messages for others.
Got it. And I've heard growing up, I've heard Akashic records being tied to looking at your own past lives. So is that a misconception, or are past lives just one of several elements that can come with an Akashic record reading?
Right. It's probably the most asked for aspect within the Akashic, but it is certainly not the only. You can literally ask any question. I always tell people that they're a little bit sassy. It's like if you go in and you say, what do you want to tell me their day? They're going to be like, I don't know. What do you want to know about?
Got it.
You have to go in with like, am I on the right journey today? What can I do today to enable me to get to the next step in my goal? Or is there something that I experienced early in my life that I can release? There's a lot of just ways to access your own higher contracts, your own higher consciousness, to get clarity around things that you may feel stuck on. It's like therapy sessions with your own guides.
Oh, I love it when it's put that way. That's a really great way to put it. Wow, wow.
Mhm,
And I
mhm.
also noticed that you work with the concept of human design. Now, I am very new to this concept, I admit. So you're going to explain this to me as well as someone listening. But what does human design entail?
So human design it's like another rabbit hole, right? It's fascinating. It was downloaded by this man who basically kind of disappeared from his family in the 70s. Nobody knew where he went, and he reemerged, I don't know, 5, 10 years later. And he had this whole system that he had basically channeled. And it integrates I Ching, which is the Chinese I Ching. It integrates gene codes and astrology and minerals and all of these aspects. It's like 7 different systems, all within one system. And the parallels and the overlap between them is uncanny. It's amazing. There's a part of the chart that is your conscious astrology, that is like your birth chart, and then your unconscious astrology, which is when they feel like spirit connects to your body. I believe it's about, oh, I'm going to get this wrong. Someone will correct me in the human design land. I think it's like 6 weeks before you're born, 3 months before you're born, something like that. And so there's these two aspects that you can look into. There is your, I call it your lens through which you see things. So what's your generating system through your chakras? How are you creating energy, or are you someone that needs to be around someone that generates energy so that you can come up with the ideas? It's really just another deep dive into our own inner consciousness.
Wow. No, I've been seeing human design pop up a lot in my algorithm, the way Akashic did for you and yours. Maybe it's something I got to look into, maybe not for myself to practice, but just to learn about, because I have been seeing. Are you noticing there is an uptick in interest recently in it?
I would say so. Yeah, it's becoming one of those things, maybe more like, I'm going to forget this part too. What is that one? Enneagrams. It's a lot like enneagrams were for so long, or Myers-Briggs. It's another way of looking at our internal systems. Yeah. And I do think there is an uptick in it, and that more people are getting interested and are seeing the similarities. And I really recommend Aura Minerals. She's on Instagram, and she not only talks about the gates through which the sun travels, which the gate is essentially the degrees at where the sun is,
Mhm.
but what's activated within that and what crystals are aligned with that, and how you can utilize that on it shifts every few days. So it's a much more fine-tooth comb way of looking at astrology and energy.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I'm definitely gonna look into it because I mean I'm sure you have do you have a crystal collection yourself as well? I mean, maybe that's a very elementary question. Oh, that is beautiful. Well, no one can see it, but I get to enjoy it. But that is beautiful. What kind of crystal is that?
I believe it is Brazilian citrine.
Wow. And so with your human design work, do you incorporate crystals into your work, whether human design work or otherwise, when you're with
I
clients?
do, because everything we know has energy, and it's important for us to utilize natural resources that help us attune to frequencies that are going to enable us to reach our full potential. So I fully believe in the power of crystals. I do believe that you need to pick them on your own, or feel an attraction to them in some way. Maybe a little bit differently than tarot cards, where people say you have to be gifted them. I'm not so much a fan of that, but I do think you have to have a connection to the crystal. I've heard a lot of people talk about the vibrations they get sometimes when they pick them up, and I've only had that happen once or twice, but it is
Mm.
powerful when it does. Yeah.
Yeah, that happened to me for the first time, I think a year ago. I recently started getting myself a lot of crystals, and I stepped into a crystal shop and I looked at, I love amethyst, and I love purple, which is why my podcast is all purple, one of my favorite colors. But I saw the amethyst, and when I picked it up, I got a little, like, it was a pleasant dizziness. It was so, and I love that. It's like a little high.
It
It's such a
is.
great feeling. Yeah, and I have, so that all being said, or that with all that in mind, I have all my crystals here, and it sounds interesting to incorporate crystals into all the other elements of human design that you mentioned. It's so fascinating. Well, I learned something new today, and I have something new to
Cool.
research.
Yeah, I think there's so many accounts out there that have it, and it's one of those things. Find a reader that you align with. I use it within my system for cosmic alignment. I look at your astrology, I look at your Akashic records, and I look at your human design to give you a full comparison. Really get into the root of all of these systems to see the similarities and the patterns, and where you are in your journey at this moment, versus just pulling one. And you can do it either way, through the package or individually, but it is just a great tool.
That sounds intricate and so helpful to see it from all those different angles. Well, and with the work that you've done, if you're able to share, is there an experience with a client that you've had over the years that it just has been not only impactful for them, but just so impactful for you that just it's just such an incredible memory that you've carried with you?
Oh gosh, that's a hard one to pick. I would have to say, when it comes to astrology in particular, I remember helping a girl. She actually owns a mineral store. I can give you a link for her. We talked about her astrology as she was struggling, like, do I stay in this job? Do I go? Why do I feel this pull towards something that isn't necessarily in alignment with what I thought I was? And now we've gone to the point where we've gone into the Akashic records for her business and for her. And she Reikis all of her minerals before she sends them. And she started receiving messages about how potent these minerals felt when clients got them. And she was just blown away at the validation because she hadn't told them necessarily that that was happening. But when they received it, the energy was just pouring out of them. And so I love to see when someone can just really sink into living their greatest dream, living their potential, and feeling that confidence and calm within themselves. I do it for family members too. I was helping my sister-in-law not too long ago. She was looking at taking this big promotion, and it meant she was going to lose a lot of her free time. It was going to be super fulfilling at work. She's a Virgo. She needs to have purpose in her days. But as we talked through it, it was going to take away some of the flexibility and the artistic aspects of her free time that she loved. And she ended up not going for the promotion, which was so different than how she had come into our sessions. But yeah, it's different every time. And I just love when someone leaves feeling validated, seen, and excited about the next chapter.
Yeah, it is. It's so rewarding. It really is rewarding to see a client experience that. And this is not related to any questions I have for you. It's just so funny that you mention this family member who came to you about a promotion, which meant more money, obviously, but she discovered with you that there would be less creative time, flexibility. You are the third person in the last week to bring up that very specific topic of taking on a promotion or taking on more money, but then having less quality, which is subjective,
Right.
person to person, but less quality of living. I don't know, I just consider that a little bit of a sign from myself. Because I literally texted a friend yesterday. I said, if I had, because I have a 9 to 5 job full time, and I just said, if there was someone out there who said, I'm going to pay you 20 grand more, but you're going to be in a fast paced, stressful environment, based on where I am now, where I'm very happy, I don't know if I would take it. I don't think I would take it, but that's just my own personal opinion. Everyone's different. But it's just I just wanted this a little side note. Just very interesting that you were the third person or outlet. I saw something on social media, my friend, and now you. So speaks to the signs from the universe, you know?
I think so.
Yeah. Now, what do you recommend to folks who book a reading with you? Are there certain types of expectations or level of expectation that you hope clients come to you with?
I will help anyone who's never had a reading before to someone who has and still has questions. I love to tailor it to exactly what your needs are and meet you where you're at. I never try to do a cookie cutter reading. I like to have you, talk through some questions in the beginning so that I'm not spending time talking about your love life and Venus and you really want to know about your career line. That doesn't do either of us any good. So yeah, I'm always excited to hear from my clients ahead of time and see what questions they have.
This makes me think with astrology, and you mentioned earlier in this episode that astrology is in the mainstream catching on very quickly. I think it's already caught on, and people are already catching on to it. But what are and I think very quickly of the pros to that, to people catching on to astrology really quickly in the last few years, but also are there any challenges that brings up for you as an astrologist?
That is so funny that you bring that up. Just this week, as a matter of fact.
Signs from the universe.
I got on my little soapbox this week. We recently had what most people on Instagram and social media were talking about, the Lionsgate portal. 8/8, it was this massive day where you were supposed to throw your hands to the sky and ask the universe for the Porsche you always wanted, and it was going to drop out of the heavens because that was the day to manifest. That's where I really struggle with modern astrology getting popular. There are no historical roots in the Lionsgate portal at all. It really started as a fad in the 1990s. I have a whole episode where I get up on my soapbox about this. But that being said, I appreciate that people are excited about astrology, but you have to be really discerning about the accounts you follow, the readers that you follow. Make sure that they're doing this from a place of not just a fad or repeating something they heard somewhere else. Are they really sinking into the history and the traditions behind it? In the West, we study astrology in a way that is much more linked to the equinoxes and the sun than it is to where the actual placements of the solar stars are within the solar system at that given moment. People think, well, that's not real and it hasn't been that way. They've been doing that since Ptolemy and the Greeks. So it's important to keep in mind what kind of astrology you're interested in. Is it evolutionary? Is it Vedic, where they get really specific? They're going to tell you when you're born, when you're going to die, who you're supposed to marry. They get really specific. Where in the West, where we just want a feeling, there's a little bit more idea of allowing free will to come in. And yeah, I think it's important to be careful about where you're finding your information and just taking it slow. We don't have to be an expert at everything overnight.
Yeah.
Let take your time. It's a long journey and a good adventure.
Right. And in my perspective, when I see on social media a reader of any kind, whether an astrologist, a medium, a tarot card reader, and a lot of their content, it's just my opinion, a lot of their content is grand rising, everything is great, fortune, 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 get your ex back. Or how to find I have the
Your
way to
twin
find the one.
flame.
Yes. Oh,
Yes.
don't get me started. I have the way to find your soulmate. I go in the other direction. And it's not to say that in our work we can't, of course, uplift the positive things, but I think it's, there's constructive things to work through also. And I mean, don't get me started on grand risings in my DMs. because I know we all have feelings about that, but yeah, I do feel that there is as I'm thankful these things are getting more and more popular, especially astrology. And I think when it comes to just psychic ability in general, people are warming up to it faster than they have before. And with that, as with anything that becomes popular, but hopefully this is here to stay, at least for us it is, we know for us it is, it's not a trend, that there'll be people who take advantage of that, or who take it and maybe have the right intention but haven't quite studied or pay the homage they need to where this all really comes from. So
Right.
that's a wonderful point that you made. So tell us about your podcast, things that make you go woo. I learned when I was on Emily's podcast, which was published last week, or it will be 2 weeks ago when this goes up, that we started around the same time, like October-ish, 2021.
Yeah.
So what inspired you to start your podcast?
So funny. My mom, I think, sent me, I believe it was a Facebook article, but it was about witches and beer making. And I've always been a sucker for history. I love understanding where we are and how we got to the beliefs that we have through time. What led to this decision, essentially, right? And this whole article and a subsequent deep dive into other podcast episodes led me down the road of how witches essentially began in beer making, the iconography behind them. There's, of course, a million different directions you can go in that, but I love bringing the stories to modern eyes, modern ears. I have an episode where I talk about the importance of the word gossip and how gossip actually started between midwives because women had hours to kill during labor. And so they talked. And it was considered, yeah, and at one point, gossip was godmother. And it has, of course, now changed. And now we think it's an awful term. So I love digging into the history of why the woo is the way it is and just taking apart things that maybe aren't really true. Yeah.
Mhm.
When someone says, "Oh, are you a witch?" I like to say back, "Well, what is a witch to you?" I'm not eating small children. I don't have a pointy hat. You know what? We don't know what others think. So I love digging into that.
I have a friend who is a tarot card reader and has an Instagram presence, and people message her, "You're a witch," and she's like, "I know." Because she has her own definition of what witch means. Like, yeah, and like I know, yeah, I'm a self-professed witch. Yeah, I agree with you. Um, but you don't you have an episode that focuses on the history of the witch iconography? And I think I was listening to that. It's a fascinating episode, so I highly recommend that episode. And I won't give it away now. Like, I would love to talk with you about that right now, but I want people to listen to that episode because it is very interesting how
Yeah.
the look of the witch and the yeah what we say about witches.
What we say about them. And
Yeah.
yeah, I get fascinated by that. I think that's probably still one of my favorite topics. I talked about Cinderella and her story and what's the deal with the dwarves and why were they in a mine, and the mirror is actually a real mirror you can see. And yeah, I just like digging into historical things and seeing what's out there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, tell our listeners how they can learn more about you and how they can reach your podcast too.
So you can find me online, emilyandherstars.com, Emily and Her Stars on Instagram. And it's probably where I'm most present. I am a sucker for sharing a good meme. I can't help myself. So if you like a good chuckle, the stories is where it's at. You can also sign up for my newsletter on either my website or on Instagram. And I email out a full calendar once a month with I try to break astrology down so it doesn't tell you this square is happening in conjunct on that Thursday. I like to tell you it's going to be a day where shit's going to get real in the morning and your computer might break in the afternoon. But my newsletter I do once a month. I have some astrology courses coming up soon, and yeah, and then the podcast, things that make you go woo. And I'm also one of the founding members of the Mediumship Sisters podcast as well, where we talk about deep dives into mediumship and how that works. So
Wonderful. Well, I'll be putting Emily's website, a link to that in the show notes, in the description of the episode. And on memes, I said it on your podcast, but I had first met you, I think, because we had a mutual interest or connection in Hannah McIntyre, who's over in the UK, and her podcast, Mediumship Matters. So we followed each other, and I loved your content. But then when I saw your memes, I'm like, okay, I gotta get to know this person because Emily's meme game is on point. So follow her on Instagram. Of course, there is even more to her than just the memes. There's the beautiful content of regarding her work and her services, but the memes are good.
thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining. It was such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me on. It was absolutely wonderful. Thanks.